Hey there. In 2004, country band Sugarland released a song called Baby Girl that contained the lyrics, "Dear Mom and Dad, please send money. I'm so broke that it ain't funny." I'm sure members of any band struggling to make their mark can totally relate to these words. And so it was for my great uncle Ben Pickering. It wasn't so much that he couldn't find work, although that too became an issue as Europe began to feel the effects of the Great Depression following the 1929 stock market crash. It was more due to the fact that as a bit player in a larger orchestra, the money wasn't always that great. So until he could really establish himself as a hot commodity, he did occasionally write home asking his mother to send money. It was truly a hand to mouth existence, or rather feast and famine, as is demonstrated in these letters home. In a letter to his mother Kate in 1927 from the Tuschinski Theater in Amsterdam, and presumably flush with money from leaving Frank Garante and joining the Symphonians, he enclosed a significant amount of money to her as she was preparing for a trip to visit him. Her response, dated December 26, 1927, noted that she had shed some tears at his generosity. But by July of 1928, he was now in the free state of Danzig, that is current day Gdansk, Poland. He wrote to his father requesting that money be sent to him. It is unclear who he was playing with at the time. In fact, in 1928, he was known to have played with at least 6 different acts, among them Theo McKebbin, Merrick Weber, Julian Fuse, Deus Bella, Teddy Klein and the Virginians, and Ben Berlin. He certainly wasn't hurting for work, but perhaps the salary he was being offered just didn't cover his expenses. Now, as nearly as I can determine from my research, the average salary for a jazz musician in Europe during the late 1920s was anywhere from the equivalent of $50 to $100 American per week. And that works out to around $800 to $1,600 per week in today's money. We do know from his contract with Frank Garani that he was making $75 a week, which works out to $1,168 in 2022 dollars. Now, that's not too shabby, but remember he's paying for his own travel expenses, room and board, etc. And I imagine that can take quite a bite out of your bank account. Now, taking into account the fact that he did travel quite a lot on both business and pleasure, it's not hard to believe that his money didn't stretch quite that far. Now, perhaps you will question whether calling Ben an itinerant musician is an accurate description, and that's fair. Even today, it's not unusual for musicians to play with several bands throughout their career. In fact, very few do stick with one group. Sure, with a group that's achieved popular success, it's less common. I mean, you have guys like Keith Richards, who's been with the Rolling Stones for forever. But a lot of that can be attributed to the level of success that the Stones have achieved. I mean, why would you move on once you've essentially achieved the pinnacle of what you can accomplish professionally? But Ben Pickering played with no less than 21 different bands and orchestras from 1926 to 1950 throughout Europe and the United States. Now, that's not to say he wasn't a prominent artist. Indeed, he was in high demand and played with some of the most significant and influential acts of the jazz and swing era. As previously mentioned, he played with Merrick Weber and Deus Bella, both of whom were big-time acts in their day, but later he also played with such well-known acts as Tommy Dorsey, Billy Barton, Jan Sabat, Tony Pastor, and Xavier Cugat. Not only was he a well-respected trombone and sometimes saxophone player, but he was also sought after as an arranger. It could be argued that moving from group to group was actually beneficial, and that allowed him to continually broaden his musical horizons. I mean, if nothing else, such mobility offered him the opportunity to visit many fascinating locales and during his travels throughout both Europe and later the United States. Now, fortunately, he was quite the shutterbug and kept many photos of these places. I should mention as I scroll through some of these that he had many dozens, if not hundreds, of photos of Germany, particularly Berlin, which is one of his favorite cities, but they were confiscated by the War Department soon after the U.S. became involved in World War II. According to my mother, who's Ben's niece, the government was always on the lookout for information that could help them in working up targets for the bombing raids on Germany, particularly Berlin. And sadly, these were never returned to him after the war. And so let me go ahead. I'll scroll through these pictures now. There are quite a few of them here. I've put together sort of an extensive gallery this week with over 50 pictures from around the world, and I hope you enjoy. So that's it for this week. I actually moved up next week's episode because it's something I've really been wanting to get into. Well, I will have fewer pictures from my collection, but the subject matter will more than make up for it. It covers Germany during the Weimar era, particularly Berlin, and Berlin was sort of like the Vegas of today, only more decadent. It was really the place to be back in the 20s and 30s. So definitely tune in for that. And if this is your first visit to my channel, I want you to welcome any new viewers, and please, if you do like what you see, then subscribe and like this video. It pushes my channel up the rankings so more people are aware it exists. Like I said when I started this channel, it's all about getting people to see and enjoy what I have to offer. It doesn't do any good just sitting in my closet, so this is definitely a labor of love. And I like to see that people appreciate it. So until next week, have a good one.